Welcome to Concept to Creation, a podcast featuring entrepreneurs who share their business journey. We'll hear what motivated them to turn their dreams into a business. They'll share stories from the trenches of business, from raising capital, creating products or services, navigating regulations, hiring employees, and managing competition and growth. We'll discover their successes and failures, and they'll provide advice for budding entrepreneurs. Now, here's your host and fellow entrepreneur, Mike Conrad.
And here we are. Welcome back. This is episode number 3 of the Concept to Creation podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for subscribing to this podcast. It's nice to see our audience grow. Also, thanks for your comments and feedback. I really appreciate that. You guys have given me some good ideas on who to reach out to and what other additional questions you would like me to ask our guests. So thanks for your feedback. Also, thanks to the editor-in-chief of Circuit Assembly Magazine, Mike Butow. He and his team at the magazine are syndicating this show on pcbchat.com. So thank you, Mike, and team over there at Up Media. We have a lot of great, very interesting guests booked already on this show. On my other show, Reliability Matters, it's sometimes difficult to find guests, but in this show, it's a little easier. So I think one thing entrepreneurs have in common is they love to talk about their business. It's kind of it's their child in many ways, and who doesn't like to talk about their children? So it is, I'm very fortunate that we're getting quite a few people agreeing to be on this show and share their journey. And the person that I would like to introduce now, who's going to share his journey, is Mike Scimeca. He is the owner of multiple businesses, but all under the umbrella of FCT Assembly. Welcome, Mike.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being my guest today. Let's talk a little bit about FCT Assembly. Why don't you explain to our audience what FCT Assembly is, what they do, and what your stake in the electronic assembly industry is. What place in that business structure is FCT Assembly?
Yeah, so FCT Assembly really has 4 divisions, I would say, and sometimes I lose track. But the first division we have that I'll talk about is FCT Solder. And FCT Solder really started with a partnership with Neal & Superior on the S100C bar. And that company focuses on lead-free solder, solder paste, fluxes, and other like wire solders and other miscellaneous solder products. We also have a partnership with Fred Cox of MET that we created a company called Blue Ring Stencils. And we're probably, I believe, the largest or second largest SMT stencil manufacturer in North America. They've also acquired Stone Mountain Tooling, which makes fixtures and tooling for the electronic assembly market. We have another company called A Laser, another division called A Laser that makes parts for the electronics, medical, aerospace industries. We use lasers to cut precision parts. And as well, we have these services in Mexico under our name FCTA Mexico. So that's kind of what FCT Assembly is. We have a couple of other companies. In fact, the first company I started was Florida Surtech, and Florida Surtech sells chemicals to the printed circuit board industry. So we're pretty knowledgeable when it comes to surface finishes, plating baths, those types of materials. So that was the first company I started, and we have a company called FCT Water Treat that deals with treatment of wastewater, metal-bearing wastes, and the last but not least, we have FCT Recovery that also does precious metal recovery through drosses and gold and so forth.
Interesting. So you would be defined in the world of entrepreneurs as a serial entrepreneur, and
I guess I don't know.
It sounds like every synergistic company you would partner with anyway, you've made an acquisition of. That's what it sounds like, because you don't have any, at least that I can see, you don't have any business units that are just way out in left field that are unrelated. I think you're all one degree of separation away from each other. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they all, obviously the reason we started those companies, back in 2001, there was a real downturn to the circuit board side. And that was when we only had Florida Surtech. And we decided, my brother and I decided to really focus on diversification. And that kind of started these other companies up, but they're all tied together in a way. I think FCT Water is kind of morphed into a different company where they focus a lot on cooling towers and boilers, which is a little bit different than our industry. They also have DI bottles that our industry uses, and a laser is a little bit different. Yeah, we use lasers that are very similar to what's used to cut stencils, but we've taken that to a different direction where we're cutting plastics and in different exotic materials that has gone after really a different industry per se. So they're all kind of tied together, but a lot of it has to do with the electronic assembly industry from beginning circuit board all the way to finished product.
How geographically diverse are your business units? I know that most of your companies, or some of your companies anyway, are headquartered in Colorado. Isn't A-Laser in San Jose, California? Is that correct?
Yeah. So A-Laser is in Milpitas. We have also a Blue Ring Stencil division in Milpitas. We have Blue Ring Stencil has probably, I think, about 6 or 7 facilities around the country. I don't even know all of them. We just opened up in Toronto last week. We have, I think, one in New Jersey, New Hampshire, Florida, Dallas. Then A-Laser's only in Milpitas. FCT Water works out of Colorado, and Florida Surtech works out of Colorado as well. So FCTA Mexico has 4 facilities. They're in Monterrey, Tijuana, Guadalajara, and Juarez.
Before FCT Assembly, were you on our industry? Were you in this industry that you're in now before?
I started, so the first company I started was Florida Surtech in 1991. And before that, right out of college, I played professional tennis for about a year and a half. And then I worked for a company called Simmons Chemical. Simmons Chemical is a distributor of Alpha Metals, and they also had the Allied Genesol product line. So I started to learn a little bit about the electronic assembly market back in the mid to late 80s through my first job of Simmons Chemical. And I was just a salesman there. But I think the unique trait I brought to that company and maybe to the industry was I was fairly good at sales, and I had a background in chemistry. So I got my degree in chemistry. So the two were a little bit unique in a sense that, when you get the chemistry degree and you're able to sell and communicate, I felt like that was something unique that I can build on.
Yeah, that does make sense. How long have you had I'm assuming I'm presenting evidence. I'm presenting information, not yet an evidence, I guess, if I say this, but I'm assuming you had some degree of entrepreneurial desire. Some so-called entrepreneurs didn't, I didn't. I guess I did, if I were to be totally honest, but many don't. They just stumble across an opportunity that's too good to pass up, or there's just no other choice in their career path. They just end up having to maybe save their career by buying a company and doing what they love to do, even though that maybe was not their goal. Was it your goal to start your own business, or are you kind of a result of circumstances that were just thrown in front of you?
Yeah, I would say when I was younger, obviously business intrigued me. I remember, when I was 19, 20, I was going to start a hot dog stand, or I was going to open up a sports shop. But in truth, probably when I was that age, I was thinking I was going to be a tennis professional. And when I came to the realization that I wasn't good enough to do that, then I started to think about business. I probably knew back then that I was going to start something on my own. But my first job, I got my first job, and my dad always told me, "Hey, learn on somebody else's dime." So I started to work and started to understand a little bit. And when I had my first daughter, I was 26. I thought, well, if I'm going to do something, it's time to do it. And I just came up with an idea. So it wasn't a company that I bought. It was really just a startup company with an idea, no customers, no formulations, and just I'll figure it all out. And that's what I did.
There must be some risk-averse nature, or actually not risk-averse, okay with risk nature about you, because to leave a quote-unquote perfectly good job with a stable paycheck, At least that's the promise. In exchange for going into a field of business where statistically 75% of all new businesses fail within 10 years, half fail within 5 years, a third fail within the first year, is, there's got to be a unique mindset to everyone who thinks that they can beat the odds. It's like the guy that shows up to a table in Vegas and they look at the, say it's roulette, and they look at the indicator that shows the last 20 hands, and it's been black, 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 black. They think they've got a formula. They go, I'm going to bet on black because it's on a trend, or I'm going to bet on red because there hasn't been a red in a while. There are people who are not risk averse who are successful, and there are people who are not risk averse who lose everything. What made you think you could beat the odds, or did you not know what you did not know?
I probably didn't know. I certainly didn't know those statistics at the time. If I did, maybe I would have been smarter and kept my job. But I think, number one, I had a lot of confidence. Number two, I love to create. So, I love to create. I love to change. It's part of who I am, and it's become kind of our company in a way. It was, at the time, I would say that I wasn't smart enough to look at all of it. I just said I was going to do it. And so I jumped in, and I had a wife that was supportive of that. I remember my wife, my parents, my brother, and certainly my mother-in-law supported me. I'm not sure anybody else did. They all thought I was nuts. But I said, let's try it. And I'm not sure I would have been successful if I had deeper pockets or if I had an out. I always tell people, they say, why were you successful? I said, there was no other choice. I threw it all out there. It's like putting all your chips on the table. I was like, all right, let's do this. So to me, there was really, I never even thought about failing.
Yeah. In the words of many movie lines, failure is not an option, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was something I never thought of, to be truthful. It was just like, all right, you got to work harder. Or there was never, I never thought of here's my fallback position. I never had a fallback position. It was always, this is going to work.
Right. I think if you have a fallback position, then you don't try as hard, right? Because you already start, half your brain's on plan B. I think looking back, at least in my case, some of my best decisions turned out to be instances where I had no choice. The circumstances limited my options to one. And even if it was a scary thing to do, we just did it. And, we were many times in our company's history, that's what saved the company, when we had no other alternative. We should have done it sooner, but we had other options that were easier and less scary and less risky and less embarrassing, like to admit you were wrong about something. So you put it off and put it off and put it off until finally there's only one option left. And it turns out, you just rip the Band-Aid off and get on with it, right? So I think we all can share that. So starting a business is not inexpensive. I think when I started my business, I had no idea how much it was going to cost. I thought I had twice as much money as I needed as seed capital. And it was like pouring isopropyl alcohol on a stove. It just went, it just evaporated, right? Much faster than I ever thought possible. How did you raise the money to start a business? Is the reason your friends weren't too supportive is because they didn't want to loan you money? They saw the caller ID and stopped returning your calls, or
no? They just thought I was crazy. They thought, kind of like you said, what are you leaving a good job for? You at that point in time, I was 26, I think, and I was running that company already. So I was kind of in charge of it. But the truth, as the story played out, I was offered, or I was promised certain things, and it's easy to promise, but when the company gets worth quite a bit more, it's hard to fulfill on that. So when that wasn't fulfilled, I just said, I'll do my own thing. So, I started mine. Cash is an interesting thing, but I started our business with my wedding money. So I got married. We had about $20,000, and that was kind of the seed capital. I also got support from my father, who offered to pay kind of a low monthly salary to keep me surviving. And I picked up a partner, Glenn Sikorsson, early on. and his dad did the same for him. So he wanted his son to have a future. So he said, I'll kick in the same amount. So we started with very little money. And, of course, we had no sales. We had really no product. I thought, well, I'll figure this out pretty quickly. And within the first 3 months, I started to recognize that these formulas were a little bit trickier than I thought. And I failed at a couple of shops. I started in Chicago, and I failed at a couple of circuit board shops. And I thought, And I remember being in a meeting with both parents, and both my father and Glenn's father. And he said, you better figure this out. And I thought, what am I getting myself into? But within about a week, I kind of figured out that first formulation, and we had sales. So at the time I thought, well, we got plenty of money like you, but then you start growing and it goes really fast, and you start buying inventory. And I really just was able to scrape by for the next 3-4 years with that model. But, I think the first year we probably did maybe 90,000 in sales after the first year. Then we typically doubled every year for the next 4 years. And so there was never any money. I kept on living on that modest amount. My wife went to work, and we survived.
I think that's a good word. The first few years of a business is really more about survival, cash flow, profit. Who knows if you make a profit or not. I know I said this on the last episode we recorded, that in our case, I didn't even think about profit. I just was worried about covering payroll the next week. And you kind of live payroll to payroll, and at home you're paycheck to paycheck, but at work you're payroll to payroll. You mentioned you'd had a double, basically a 2x growth every year. That is challenging. I was always under the impression that the number one rule of business is you have to grow. I remember I joined a CEO peer group where once a month we would all get together and basically, lie to each other about how well we're doing and pick on them and hope they don't pick on us. And the number one feedback I would receive is, you have to grow. What are you doing to grow? And I kept thinking, no pressure, no diamonds, no guts, no glory. You just got to throw it all out there and grow. And then I realized later that growth is a quite an expensive luxury, and cash flow is more important than growth. And growth and cash flow are at polar opposites, because if you grow, you suck down cash flow. So how did you manage that double-digit growth year over year, at least for the first few years, and cash flow?
Yeah, it was number one. We started with nothing, so the bar was set so low. So when you double $90,000 a year sales and you go to, let's say, 170, although it's significant to you doing it, it doesn't take a whole lot of cash. So we leveraged our suppliers as best we could. We went probably out to 90, 120 days pay. We probably did that for maybe the first 6-7 years. We would kind of play with that. We'd sometimes get credit cards to help offset some of that stuff. We'd manage our expenses. For the first year, I blended all the chemicals. I delivered materials. I did all the accounting myself at night. So it was a one-man operation for the first 6 months. My partner Glenn, who I had mentioned, came in and started helping a little bit. And so you kept your cost as low as you could. You kept your expenses down, and you leveraged what you could to do it. I think we got some help from a bank that really was tied to Glenn's father that gave us maybe another 40 or 50,000. But it was a real struggle, and you learn a lot from that. Right now things are a lot easier, but you learn a lot from that. But looking back, 30 years ago, in a weird way, it was kind of fun. So, you're just kind of grinding, you're working 15, 16 hours days. And I look back at it with fond memory. So it's not like, oh, that was terrible, I'd never do it again. It was kind of enjoyable.
Yeah, I share that same experience. I think age, time, distance all have a unique ability to kind of dull down or blur out, or maybe even erase some of the stress that was involved. And you end up looking back at this nostalgic time. I did the same thing. I would go to work on Monday, not come home till Wednesday night. And, I would do that several times a month as we were about to release a product. And I know, I mean, I can remember there were some very stressful times when I didn't know if we were going to make it. I didn't know if we were going to keep our house. I didn't know, if we'd have to, do the big bankruptcy or whatever. Right. Those were all lurking back there as fear.
Yeah.
And, but now all I remember was the adventure, right?
Right.
I know I went through a lot of stress, but I don't feel that anymore. So yeah, there was really no PTSD involved. It's maybe it's a little bit of Stockholm syndrome. We get to be fond of our captor, and our captor was debt and the threat of failure. Besides cash flow, what were some of the other? Because cash flow probably never goes away. But what are the other struggles?
Cash flow. We struggle with cash flow. I'll bet you we struggle with cash flow for 20 years, maybe 15 years, I would say. And because we're always growing, right? And so your cash flow, you're always looking at two ways. You're either burning cash or you're growing and you need cash, right?
Yes.
And either way, you're struggling, right? You're always trying to think, where am I going to get the next amount of cash to keep growing? And so it's never easy. I would say, for me, the struggle was, with the growth was, how do you get everything done? How do you manage your time? It's easy when you're young. When I was 27, when we started this thing, maybe the first 5-7 years, you can work 15, 16 hours a day, but at some point in time that catches up to you. So, figuring out how to manage your time, build a really good team. Before it was, everything had to come through me, right? I've learned so much about the importance of really good employees and really good partners. And so, what I know today, I would certainly make some of those changes and focus on building really good people, because when you're young and you're 27, you think you do it all and you put energy to it and you could do it. And all you do is you get a bunch of gophers. But the truth is the gophers don't help a whole lot and they cost money. And so you're kind of burning extra money, but you're not getting yourself out of the hole that you're digging yourself in. So, to me, I think some of the mistakes we had with that growth was, did we spend our money wisely to build the people? Did we value the people? And I would say, lastly, it was not saying no enough, right? You take everything on, and that's a salesman's mentality. All right, we'll take that order, even if it's 10% margin or 15% margin. Yeah, we'll sell that, right? And is I've come to find, at least from my perspective, qualifying your customers and the products that you sell are really important. But when you start a company, you don't have any sales. So you take everything, and that could kind of backfire on you a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit like putting starter fluid down the carburetor, right? It'll get you started, but you're not going to go far on it, right? It'll burn up your engine if you try and run on that.
Exactly.
You mentioned something interesting, and that's the word no. I've done a lot of talks to students, college students, entrepreneurial type college students. And, so I tell them the most profitable word in sales is no. We make more money saying no than we make saying yes. And the trick is knowing the right customer, the right product, the right profit margin, and saying no to discounts. And, what a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't realize it in my first probably 15 years in my almost 30-year business career, is that if one gives 10% of their price away, that could be 100% of the profit, the net profit at the end of the day. Right. And I realized after trying to say yes to everyone, because to me it was a win-win. I got a sale and my competitor didn't. 2 wins, right? And I realized at one point, out of no other choice to realize this, was that I would be cheaper just sending this customer a check for $5,000 than I would be to sell them a machine at the price they wanted to pay. I would have saved money just sending them money, right?
Right.
And sometimes the best thing you can do is say no, and then they go to your competitor who hasn't caught on to that concept yet.
Exactly.
And says, yes, that's the closest thing to a Trojan horse you can send into your competitor, is a customer that's
exactly right.
Money. And I don't know about you, confirm if this is just me or this is, if you've noticed this too. People who lead on price, if that's the first question, when they're on the phone, tend to be some of the worst customers. They tend to be needier. They, at least from an equipment standpoint, if they just lead with price, I can guarantee you they're not going to maintain their machine. They're not going to partner with the supplier. They are just going to pick up the phone whenever they don't understand something and expect you there in 10 minutes. The lowest profit, the highest cost, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting piece when you look at all our companies. So I saw that mistake when I was working at Florida Surtech. I saw that, when you start, you take anybody. And so you're selling to people. But what you come to find out is what we've come to learn is we were selling people that, like you said, were all about price. But those same customers probably needed the most service. So they consumed your time. And the third piece is they paid their bills the worst. And so you were like, what are we doing with this? We have this small customer that they need the most of our time and they don't really pay their bills that well. So that's where we started to learn, from Florida Surtech to FCT Assembly, we made a big adjustment. We said, stop. We're not just going to sell everything. We're not going to be a commodity seller of, for instance, 6337 solder. We're not doing that. We're going to focus on more value technology and really push, value sell. We offer solutions and we're going to sell that, and we're not going to just get into the price. And so that shift changed. The interesting thing is, even with Florida Surtech today, we still fight that same culture because, I kind of started it. I did that for 15 years. And so I'm still fighting with some of those same people saying, guys, what are you doing? But where we started fresh with FCT Water, FCT Assembly, we now really qualify our customers really well because, sometimes that same customer that you mentioned that talks about price, they usually take the same amount of time to land the customer that you can make really good margin, get paid correctly, and don't need that much of your time.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that us business owners don't get until many years later. It's like a 15-year, 20-year PhD program, right? It's late in the curriculum before we figure that out. But that's probably good though. Yeah. Don't you think that's good?
I was going to say it probably cost us $1 million to learn that or more.
True.
But you eventually get there.
True. But I think if we knew that too soon, I'm a big believer in that what we learn synchronistically, and there's a certain timing involved. You made a comment earlier that if you knew what the risks were from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you may not have started the company, right? So, and I think the fact that we went after every sale, profitable or not, mostly not, really, those sales are sometimes easier to get. When you give something away for half price, obviously there's not a lot of work involved in getting that sale. So maybe those were needed at the time, even though they weren't profitable. They did allow cash to come in and flow through and get some vendors paid and cover payroll. I know that one of the worst things I could do, which was absolutely necessary to do, was to challenge my team to bring in more orders. I'll approve anything, just bring me orders. And we would get a flood of orders and a ton of money coming through. And, as long as it was almost like a pyramid scheme, not that we were a pyramid scheme, but the concept of, just keep getting more orders, even though none of them are profitable. As long as you keep getting more and more and more orders, you can maintain the cash flow. At some point though, you have to pay your vendors, and that's when the lack of profits really make it challenging to do that. So you just borrow more money and go into the line of credit and just kick the can.
I remember, it's interesting. I remember a story when I first started. There was a company called Circuit Etching Techniques out of Elk Grove, and really nice people. And I went in there and I was selling a product. And so I had this product, and basically I was the new guy. And back then, this is 1991, I took a Xerox label and I would glue it on, and our containers looked so much worse. And so I'd say, hey, let me sell you this reflow oil. I remember, I'm going to sell you this reflow oil, or reflow flux. And he said, okay, fine, try it. And it was all about price. And bring it in. And I remember he called me up that afternoon. He said, hey, I've scrapped 20 panels. The solder's getting eaten away. And I go, what? And so I look there, and there's smoke in the room from this. Obviously, I did something wrong. And I remember looking at Rao, and I said, nah, that's not good. He goes, no, it's not. He was really mad. And I go, can I come back next week and try again? And to my point, to your point, I think if you look at that, I had to start somewhere. If I started with the high-end people, I would have failed. But if I could have started with those people, they gave me multiple opportunities. Yeah, the margins were low, but I could kind of craft our business a little bit based on those people. So if I tried to perform this in Northern California instead of Chicago, we would have failed.
Yeah. You mentioned just a little bit ago, you used the word commodity. So whether it's fair or unfair, accurate or not accurate, at least two of your businesses, stencils and solder paste, may be considered by many as a commodity, right? They're sold by many people. You all kind of share the same cost of materials, and generally capital equipment buyers aren't the ones buying those products. They're done by commodity buyers within big companies,
right?
Whose job it is to, whether they use Alpha or Kester or FCT or whoever, Indium, their job is to take the type of paste the engineer is looking for and then get the best price on it, right? That's their thinking, and they're bonused on that, I think. So how do you take FCT assembly or Blue Ring stencils? How do you take a company that manufactures what many buyers consider is a commodity? And even though I know there are differences within those quote unquote commodities, how do you stand out? How do you make FCT assemblies, Blue Ring stencils, A-laser, all the different entities you have? How do you make those stand out from other companies that sell technically not correct, but what a lot of your customers would go, it's the same thing, just in a different label on the jar? How do you stand out and sell more than the actual product?
Yeah, I mean, so it goes back to, a big part of who we are. And I would say that when you talk to our managers, we talk about differentiation. And how do we differentiate ourselves versus the other guy? And I think Blue Ring Stencil is a great case for that because, one of our big competitors, and I'm fairly close to some of our big competitors, would say, hey, all we do is cut holes in a piece of stainless steel sheet and sell it. And the faster you do it, the better you are. But we look at how do we differentiate that, and so we developed our nanoslick gold coating. We came up with that to say we're going to release solder paste better than anybody else, or we'll come up with our mesh welding technology that gets rid of the scrap when you get a delamination because of the glue. We had nanoslick gold's a great example, but when you look at that example, there were other people that started kind of copy that technology. And so then we came up with the next set of technology that allowed really our new nanoslick gold that allows us a 10x life versus the old one. So to me, it's always about, what can we do that keep on improving our technology that offers solutions to our customers. And so, solder paste is an interesting product. And I think bar solder is more of a commodity than solder paste because solder paste is really technical, but it goes back to selling value and selling to the right person, right? If you go to a Jabil or a Flextronics, their job is, like you said, to lower the price. But if you go to their customer, that OEM that says, hey, I need this problem. These are the problems I have. Can you solve it? You can solve those problems. Then you're able to hold that price. So we always talk to our group about selling value, but I also challenge our teams in all our companies that what are we going to do next? So let's just not rest on our laurels. We came up with nanoslick gold. How do we take that to the next level? What is the next level? So from that, now we've developed a whole new laser structuring system that will make that coating even better. And what we found is, on the commodity side, there's not that much profitability, but as you add some of these other technologies to that, we're able to get the right EBITDA that allows us to keep on growing.
I muted myself there. Through the value added, I guess, right?
Yes.
So the commodity is the ticket in the door, and the value added services are where the profit comes from. I would suppose.
Yeah.
So what skills do you possess today that you lacked when you started this business journey?
I don't know.
You have to come up with at least one, right?
Well, I can come up with a number. I could tell you this: I don't have the energy I had when I was 27. I'm probably more risk averse than when I was 27. But I've learned a lot from an accounting standpoint. I've learned how to read an income statement. We we built our own ERP system, right? And so to know exactly where your money's at, how it flows, what you need, your gross profits, those things are really important. Before you just get by, then you don't realize it's a real tool to your business. So, I think that's one thing I've learned that's really critical in business. I think the HR component, I wouldn't put a lot of value. Even 5 years ago, I'm not sure I'd put a lot of value. And now I look at that and say, this is the most value that we can put within our company, or one of the most values. And really, about 7 years ago, I started down a different path with our companies. And I decided to build the next generation of managers. I was getting old. My brother was a couple of years older than me. My partner, Glenn, is similar in age to me. And I thought, we'll either have to sell these businesses, or we can keep them going. And to me, it was more about leaving that legacy and building the managers of tomorrow, those champions of tomorrow, and teaching them all that I learned. But the truth is, Mike, they're smarter than me, all these guys. So we brought in people and we focused a lot on education. So they go to all the classes. Being water treatment, they're going to be, we have the youngest certified water treater ever. So they go to the classes. We meet like this last year with the pandemic. We were meeting weekly. We read books. We talk about business, what's important, what's not, where we focus, and so to me, those are the things I've learned. Value the employees, value the education in the teaching piece. Know that the financial piece is a really important part of your business that a lot of people see. And then also coming back to focus and qualifying the right customers and the right product lines that you want to sell.
Yeah, I think human nature is such that if if you consider yourself a 10 on a scale and you hire somebody, you're going to hire not a 10, you're going to hire a 9. It's just job security. And then that 9 will get to the point where they have to hire someone and they'll hire an 8. And you can see the direction, right? It's a downward death spiral. And in the early days of my business, I think arguably I was the smartest person in the room. Not because I'm the smartest person on the planet, but because I hired people I could afford. And gopher would be, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but I hired people who could just do my tasks for me. I was the brains and they would just run the tasks for me. And then eventually I think we all get to the point where we realize that, my goal now in life is if I, go into my conference room filled with staff, I want to be the dumbest guy in the room. I want to surround myself with people who are smarter than me. And, I still got the gut. I'm sure you still have the gut, the instinct, right? You're the guy that should be up in the crow's nest to see, to see where the stars are and where the horizon is and figure out, the direction of your ship. But you should not be the guy shoveling coal into the furnace, and you should not be the guy, painting and swabbing the deck and things like that. You want to be a more strategic role. But in the beginning, when we start our businesses, we are the chief cook and bottle washer, right? We are. Yeah. We're the free labor, right? That allows it to be successful at first. And I think
go ahead.
No, I think the reason 75% of businesses fail statistically in the first 10 years is probably because business owners don't evolve. They think that it was a guaranteed success. What got them from A to B worked, which was working, 16-hour days and doing everything yourself and always being the smartest person in the room. And then eventually the company outgrew them. And, it's like putting a tree in a small pot. It will sprout, it will grow, and eventually it will die because it just doesn't have enough room to spread its roots and form a foundation. I think that's a similar thing that happens with probably most of the businesses that fail. So I think go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm interviewing you and I'm doing the talking here, but which I guess is a trait of a lot of entrepreneurs. But just to finish the point, I think the 75% failure rate is probably not that high if people can realize they need to get out of their own way, right? They need to evolve. They need to shift up to the next level. I'll turn it back to my guests now. Thank you for letting me go on that diatribe.
I was just going to make a couple of points to that. For us and for me, and I know my daughter's the same way, built, and she's kind of taken on a lot of my role, but we love change, right? It's always about how do we improve, how do we evolve, how do we adapt. A lot of people are stuck in their ways and they can't make that change. And it could be that the market changes, or the dynamic of business changes. Who knows what it is? But people get stuck. And we've bought, and I've probably bought over the last 30 years, maybe I've bought, I don't know, 20 companies, 15, 20 companies or so. And we're usually buying a company, maybe, I don't know if distress is the right word, but we're buying a company because of what you just said. They weren't able to figure out how to grow beyond that. They're stuck. They've hired the wrong people. They don't know how to fire somebody, how to make a change, all of these things. So we come in and maybe they say, oh, you're the tough guy. It's not tough. It's just, to me, it's business. And we're really nice about all these things. But the fact is there's a certain way you got to run business. And as you run your business, you got to constantly be looking to improve and evolve. And if you don't have that change capacity, your things change all the time. So a lot of people in our company, they laugh. They go, Mike, you like to change almost too much. And I go, okay, maybe. But the truth is, I've got a group of about 12 managers now, and they've taken on that and they understand that. And so I think that makes us a lot stronger, and hopefully you partner yourself up with the right people. For me, I was more of a visionary, more creative, let's say, on the chemistry side as well. But I needed a bunch of what we call integrators, people that can get things done and focus on the details. And so you have to find that right mix of people and play to their strengths, right? And so again, these are things I've learned. Before it was like let's hire a gopher. And then you're looking and say, who else can take this? There's only one guy that can do it all. And there's only so much of that one guy.
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses are started by entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are largely creative, conceptual people. I consider myself a conceptual, creative person, which means I come up with a lot of ideas, but I don't actually finish any of them, right?
Right.
I'm the guy
That's
who
me.
Gets really excited about something, particularly if I'm on vacation. My team shared this with me not too long ago, that they always used to joke, when Mike comes back from vacation, get ready for the meeting because he's going to come back with 25 new ideas, which
Right.
sounded really good when I'm drinking tequila, smoking a cigar in a pool in Mexico, but maybe not in the real world. But we can frustrate people, us type of people, we can frustrate
Right.
people very easily because we are, just if we're ever kidnapped, just follow a trail of uncompleted projects and it'll lead to our bodies, right? So, you have to bring in people who can, play their role in the relay race where, your job is to pass that baton and then create something else and then pass that baton. And
Right.
And I think that also guarantees that you won't be in the 75% majority that fails. You'll be in the 25% majority that makes it. You talk about education and, educating your staff, which is wonderful. I think, I'm a big believer, at least my experience has taught me, when it comes to retaining employees, it's almost never about the money. It is about their sense of fulfillment and being part of something greater than themselves, right? That's been my experience. People who leave for money, it's usually just an excuse. It really is that they weren't fulfilled. And maybe they didn't even realize that. They were just unsatisfied. So, what are you unsatisfied about?
Right.
Money. So, but it's usually never about the money. It's about just being part of a team and being valued.
Mm-hmm.
So let's carry that education theme. And I'm going to ask you to educate your younger self. If you had the ability to go back in time, I think you said it was 1991.
1991 I started.
Florida Surtech. So let's go back to 1991. Older Mike is talking to younger Mike. What would you tell younger Mike? What tips would you give him based on what you've learned all those years? And maybe even more importantly, what wouldn't you tell him that you know now?
Well, I think that the first thing I would tell him, but this might bankrupt us, but I would say, relax. Don't worry. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And so you don't have to get everything done right now. You don't have to land everything right now. Take your time, think things through, and make sure you try to go on the right path. So I would probably start there. And as you get older, you start to relax a little bit and you start to think a little bit, and the anxiety and the stress doesn't eat at you. And so to me, that would probably be first and foremost. And the second thing is make sure you take your time in building your team, and don't get so caught up into a certain industry or a certain product. Look at what makes the most sense, what fits your skill set, and if you do that, I think you have a better chance of success. So I think those things are really important. Obviously, building when you have the money to afford it, building the right team and creating the right culture. We've had some really interesting. If I were to write a book about some of the culture shifts that we've needed to do, it's been really, for me, educational. So you look at A Laser about 5 years ago or 6 years ago, where they were heading and where they're at today with a new manager and just a whole new philosophy. FCT Water, these are some of our greatest accomplishments that I've gotten to witness and be a part of. Starting with the right culture, getting people, making sure it's fun, making sure they're in the right roles, getting the right person in the right spot, and empowering these people to take the ball and run with it. When you're younger, you don't do any of that. So I would say, hey, you don't have to do it all, Mr. Hotshot. Like my mom used to say, you're 2 houses from the poorhouse. Don't ever forget it. So be humble and allow other people some opportunity.
Yeah, I've long said that the difference between success and failure is about 4 paychecks. It's
yeah.
There's a time when that was actually true. There are common myths out there about what it's like to own your own business, and these are usually held by people who have never and will never hold their own business. The common myth is you own your own business, you can write your own paycheck, you can use the company credit card all the time, you can take extended vacations, and you can, just call in and boss people around. Those are the myths. For those who are considering starting a business, what's it really like, Mike, to own and operate one business, if not 20 businesses?
It's nothing like you just said. I mean, those are the myths, and they don't recognize that what ends up happening when you own a business, the business never really turns off. Your mind, I think maybe this is a good thing or a bad thing, but your mind never rests. You're on a vacation. I've yet to take one vacation since I started FCT where I didn't work at some point in time. So you've got to love what you're going to do, number one, because if not, you're going to be miserable. Because it never stops, and in a sense, you're always thinking of cash, and is the next paycheck going to be there? So you got to be able to handle those types of things. But for me, when I got into my business, I remember I was 27 and my daughter was a year old, and I wanted the freedom. Probably when I started, I thought the company wouldn't be as big, but I'd be a lot richer somehow. But the truth is I wanted my freedom. So I was okay to work 12 or 14 or even 15-hour days. But if my daughter had a dancing recital or she had a tennis match, whatever, I had that luxury of going to any of those events. And I did that. But at the same time, what people don't realize is then I went back to work at night, at 8 o'clock at night, doing this or that. And so, what I sometimes question, would I do that again? My mom always said, Michael, go work at Quaker Oats. You're a chemist, just enjoy it. Work at Quaker Oats. I think I probably wouldn't have been happy doing that. But I tell you, life would be a lot easier in some ways. But I'm kind of a journey guy, right? I love journeys. The end result isn't what intrigues me; it's the journey. I have a big motorhome. We travel all the time, and it kind of fits who I am. It's going to Maine or going to Vermont. Once I'm there, I'm like, okay, I'm there. I saw it for a damn ready to go somewhere else. But it's the same thing with business. It's this evolving and the journey to get there that entices me. So if you don't like that type of stuff, don't get into business. But for me, it fit. It fit, I guess.
I love that. I've never heard that before. That's a very interesting perspective. It's about the journey, not the destination, because
right.
You're in a motorhome right now. It's probably a nice, Class A or whatever,
right.
A home on wheels.
Yeah.
That is your journey now. To carry that analogy backward, when you first started, you were probably in a sleeping bag in a tent on your excursions.
Yeah, a small apartment where I remember my friend said, "Hey, your living room, I can touch the one wall from the other wall from head to toe." I go, "Yeah, right. Quit making fun of it."
Yeah, well, I remember our first apartment. My goal in life was to be able to vacuum the entire apartment from more than one receptacle, more than one plug. I
Right.
said, this is pretty
Yeah.
sad that I don't even have to unroll the whole thing, right? I can
Yeah.
reach every part of it from one
Yeah.
AC plug. Yeah, I
Right.
love the fact that it's about the journey, because the journey is remarkable. It is a thrill ride with scary features. It's a fantasy ride. It's all these things, and it constantly changes. The view is constantly changing out the entrepreneur journey,
Right.
journey window.
Right.
And I think that most entrepreneurs are not into it for a destination, because if you were into it for a destination, you wouldn't end up with all these companies. You just keep buying more, right? You just keep starting journeys over and over again. So
Yeah.
the journey
That's
must
true.
be better than the destination, right? It's
Well, for me it is, and I always look at things, and maybe I've learned this over time. Is every maybe issue or crisis really is an opportunity, right? We just had a call, I think, yesterday with our quality guy, our quality manager, and he said, "Hey, one of our companies, they need to start looking because the DoD's changing the rules at the new NIST certification and this, that." And my other partner was like, "Oh God, we don't want to do this. It's another added expense." And I look and I go, "Are you serious? I'm really excited about this, because maybe our competitors can't do it. Maybe this creates an opportunity. Maybe not, but we're only going to get better from these things." So if you kind of embrace these kind of obstacles, they usually turn into something positive. At least that's the way I look at it. Maybe I'm a positive guy, but we always look at, for me, I always look at those obstacles as a way to get better and to learn.
I think the founder, the leader, the entrepreneur's outlook really is like that snow shovel on the front of a freight train. That it does help clear the path. And I don't know why. I don't think there's anything voodoo, new agey about that. But I think the outlook, the attitude of the person leading the company has a lot to do with the success or failure of the company. If you're Eeyore like doom and gloom, everything in your experience is going to be doom and gloom. And if you're just up and thinking of all the possibilities and open to learning new things and open to not being the smartest person in the room and open to new challenges, and I think that's what kind of further guarantees a company's success. At least in my experience, it looks like in your experience too. Final question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Did you want to?
I was just going to say, I mean, that's a part of my role now, right? As I start moving away from doing a lot of the banking and the accounting and stuff, and my daughter takes that stuff on. A lot of it is, I was in Juarez about a week and a half ago, and it's like, guys, we're right on the verge of exploding. This thing's going good. They look at it and say, "Oh, we got to do this. We're short here." And I go, "You guys have no idea how close you are. This looks so good to me." And so you have to be realistic in where you're at and say, "Okay, let's come up with a plan to get it to where we want to be." But I don't see how, like you said, that leader has to be that optimist to do it. But they have to be also a realist, right? So if you're doom and gloom, I could tell you my people wouldn't be working here. They'd all have quit by now. And the culture that we've created is what keeps these people here.
Right. At the risk of sounding like a Dale Carnegie, Zig Ziglar kind of person, I think a lot of people see challenges and a lot of people see opportunities. Those that see opportunities are people like yourself, and those that see challenges are maybe people who work for people like yourself.
Right.
And it's up here. It's up here. And it's not all up here. How much of your business, I'd like to ask this to everybody, how much of your business success is Mike? How much of it is luck?
Well, I would, I don't know if I would say luck had a whole lot to do with our success. When you look at, if you looked at our history, I would say that I hit a bunch of singles and maybe I hit a few doubles. I didn't hit a home run. Yeah, I look at these guys like on Shark Tank sometimes, or my kid will be watching it. I go, I'm not smart enough to hit the home run. I don't know how these guys did it. That's not me. So I was the type of guy that tried not to strike out, hit a couple of singles, hit a couple of doubles. And therefore, I don't think I had a lot of luck. I think I'm not even sure I don't think I was the smartest guy in the room. I think it was just more belief and a work ethic that combined that allowed us to be successful. And that's why we got to where we're at. And then the ability to understand and constantly educate yourself on how do we get to the next level, and start understanding that people make a big difference. And some of those lessons that I talked about, I think are important, but I would not, I wouldn't put it on luck, but I wouldn't put it on my ability either. It was more about kind of maybe my parents raising me, that work ethic and the ability to stick with it and have that attitude that I'm going to make it work somehow.
Yeah, I like the props to your parents. I can say the same thing. My parents were both immigrants. I'm first generation American. They came here in 1957, had me in 1960, and I watched my parents work. They never had much money. They had the American dream. They had their home, and my dad was able to leave corporate world and start a small business. But he worked, and my mom worked when she did have a job before she stayed home with the kids. Just worked tirelessly, and so I think I had that work ethic. Just it's through osmosis, right? It wasn't pounded in me. I didn't see any. I didn't have any other example. I didn't have slacker parents. They worked hard, and maybe not incredibly efficiently, but always worked hard and were the frugal. When I was younger, I used to call my dad the cheapest person on the planet, and then I realized he was wise, right? He was wise, but he was also he and my mother were both my source of funding. When the banks turned me down, I thought you could write a business plan and, where do you want us to send the check? Do you want it in 20s? Do you want it in gold?
Yeah.
How do you want it? And when I realized after 2 or 3 banks turned me down, and my credit cards were maxed out and our bank account was low, and we had a mortgage and a kid, the whole scenario.
Right.
I went to my dad, and I swear, when I talk to like business students, I always say this line, which might be a little offensive to some, but I always think I had a greater chance of getting a lap dance from the Pope than I did getting money from my father, and yet he came through. I asked for $35,000, and he told me after a week, he said he wanted to think about it. That was his style. Everything was calculated. And then he came back and said, when your mother and I talked about it, and we think 35 is not a good idea. And I was already preparing my concession speech, and he goes, we think 70 is what you need. 35 is not enough. And he said 70. He might as well have said 700,000. He might as well have said 7 million, 700 million, 7 trillion. It was all the same. 70,000 could have been 70 million. It's the same from my vantage point then in 1992. So, I think we all benefit. You have, and I have benefited from the lessons our parents taught us, either intentionally or unintentionally. And some of it was what to do, and some of it was what not to do. But we took it in, and it's just part of the fabric. And you're now spreading that fabric to the other companies.
Right. My big thing I always tell people, and I think my kids have that too, is, I was blessed. I had a great childhood. My mom and dad were great. They were very frugal. My dad would spend a little bit, but my mom was really frugal. But man, did they work. And I remember when I was 16, my dad's like, all right, I'm going to show you what work really is. You're going to the machine shop. He was a machinist in Chicago. And remember there, and he was talking to his buddy Burgess. He said, put him on the dirtiest machine, but make sure he keeps all his fingers, right? Type thing. And
if you arrive with 10 fingers, you go home with 10 fingers.
Yeah, so that was the thing, and it was 12 hours a day, and it was dirty. But the truth is you have to me at least, my success was I able to pass that to my kids and my grandkids. And I remember my wife saying, oh, you're too easy. You're letting them play tennis. You're doing this. And I go, as long as they're working hard, as long as they put the effort in, they're passionate, I don't mind supporting them. But I laugh now because the people look at my kids and they go, how did they get that work ethic? I don't know if it's in the blood. I don't know if it's what we did. All I hope is that from generation to generation, we can keep that kind of same Midwestern way of doing things. So you work hard, you earn it, and it's not about the possessions you have, right? It's I got one weakness, motorhomes. Other than that, I just the rest of it is just is gravy the way I view it. So
yeah. Well, I love motorhomes too, but lately my homes have been floating on lakes, so I'm into
that's
boating.
even better.
I'm into boating.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that's even better.
We work hard. We deserve that. And I know the entire time you're driving your motorhome, and the entire time I'm floating on my boat, I'm still thinking of business. Right? It never stops.
And you're coming back, and you have 20 new ideas.
20 new ideas. He's like,
and you're saying, "Let's go, guys. We're going to do this," and they're looking. Oh God, please don't go on another vacation.
Exactly.
We got so much more to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Mike, this has been great. I really appreciate the insight and the advice and the story of your business journey. Thanks for sharing that with my audience and with me.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. I learn more and more talking to people like yourself. Before I started doing this, I thought my journey was exceptionally unique, and somehow I did it all wrong, and I managed to survive anyway. And then I talked to other business owners, and I realized that we were all in the same video game with the same trap doors and the same limited number of lives and monsters trying to get us.
Yeah. It's funny how similar it is. And I agree. I mean, I hear your story and I'm like, oh God, that's so similar to what we did. But anyways, it's fun to talk about it. Like you said, we always like to talk about our journey and the struggles we had and all that. So I thank you for your time.
Well, thanks. Right back at you. And audience, if you have any questions for Mike, I'm going to put Mike's contact information in our show notes, as well as it'll be a long list of show notes because I'll list all the companies that are associated with FCT Assembly. And if you want to reach out to them, you'll be able to do it through the show notes. For those of you who are listening to this podcast in your car, it's also available in video format, so you could see Mike's charming face and look at the cringes when I ask him tough questions. No, he didn't cringe once. But that's available on our Concept to Creation YouTube channel. So you can just go to YouTube, search Concept to Creation, and you can watch this video as well as listen to it in the car. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. This was episode number 3. We're looking forward to doing episode number 4 in 2 weeks. We'll be back at you. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Concept to Creation podcast. A special thanks to my guest today, Mike Scimeca of FCT Assembly. If you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, please be sure and subscribe. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and virtually wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening to this in the car and you would like to see the video version of this as soon as you get home, as soon as you get back to the office, be sure and search for us on our YouTube channel, the Concept to Creation YouTube channel. When you're on the YouTube channel, be sure and hit the subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you'll be notified of new episodes as soon as they're released. We do release new episodes on the first and third Tuesday of each month. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.